Okay, so in week 14 we covered Adobe Animate, and I already covered how to set up your files. Now in class I showed you why does the program do what it does. In a lot of your tools you've got two different modes. You've got regular and then primitive. And let me just double check here. Object drawing mode is on. I'm going to set it to off. We'll go over that in a moment. So object drawing mode is off. So if I have my rectangle tool, it's going to be light blue with a stroke of dark blue. We'll make the stroke about there. And I draw it on the screen. And I deselect. So if I draw any other thing, I'm just going to change this real fast to green. And I'll give it a stroke of none. So if I draw inside and then I deselect, what's going to happen when I select this circle and move it, I now get a hole in here. This is as if you used the Pathfinder in Illustrator, or when we're covering Adobe After Effects, if you did add, merge paths, and then chose subtract. Now, when you're working with your raw art, not the primitive, and you hover over, you get this little crescent shape with your mouse cursor. You could use this to change shapes as you see fit and do creative and interesting things with them as you tween them over time. One way to avoid this from happening, if you don't want that to happen, is to work in rectangle primitive mode, like the primitive tools. With the primitive tool, there's no stroke on there, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to delete it. Go back here. I'll give it a stroke of black, and that's fine. It's going to be a thick stroke. Now if I move it, the stroke stays with it, and the whole object is unified. And if I then draw a primitive circle with the same color, I'll change it to blue. If I draw this right here, I do not get that result because the primitive tools cannot do that. And as you'll see, when I hover over, I don't get the little crescent. That's the primitive tools. Whereas the raw tools, again, like I said, if I hover over, I get the crescent. I can change it. Not only that, but if I select once, I get the fill. I can move the fill outside of the stroke. I'm going to hit undo. So you got to be careful when you're working here. If you click once on the edge, you select that edge. If I double click on the edge, it selects the whole edge. So things can quickly come undone when you're working this way, and you just need to be careful. Another thing, if you want to keep working in raw art, I'll put my square there to create a new layer in your timeline right here, the page icon. If I click that, I've got a new layer. So if I click here, I'll name this square. And I know I spelled it wrong, that's fine. And then I'll name this one circle. And I spelled that one wrong too, I don't care. So now I'm going to put a poly star here. No, I'll stick with the circle. So I've got my circle. I'll change the color of it. This is going to go on a new layer, so I put it here. If I select all of it, oops, see, it's selecting both of that. So I just clicked here on the frame to select all of it. You see it did not affect the square at all. They're now independent of one another. Another option is the object drawing mode, which you get into from your brush tool. This is object drawing right here. So I'm going to click it, and you'll see it says object drawing mode is on. So I'm going to make one final layer. I'll call this object drawing mode. Like that. So now I'm going to use a primitive rectangle, and I'll make the square red, and I'll draw it on there. So since object drawing mode is on, and I select here, you'll see it says property drawing object. I can move that, and they're in the same layer. Whereas the other layer, like the circle, if I select that, it's a shape instead of an object. Drawing object right there. Click here, shape. Shapes, as I said before, can be altered working over there, which gives you more options with your tweening and animating. But like I said before, be careful because you can separate this fill from the stroke, and things can get a little unpredictable if you're not prepared for it. That is why the program works the way it does.